All right, welcome to the Explainer. We're going to dive into this ancient legal text today, but it asks a question that feels like it could have been ripped from today's headlines. What happens when the system gets it wrong?
So let's just start with the big one, right? Imagine the highest court in the land. Think of the Supreme Court. Makes a mistake, a big one. And you, and a bunch of other people, you follow their ruling because, well, they're the authority. Who's to blame when it all goes south?
So the Talmudic sages, these brilliant ancient scholars, they don't shy away from this at all. They jump right in, and they frame it as this fundamental conflict. Is it on you, the individual who did the thing, or is it on the institution, the court, that told you it was okay?
Okay, so here's the thought experiment they use. The high court makes a ruling, and whoops, they get it wrong. They accidentally permit something that's totally forbidden. So you, a regular person, you hear this official ruling, you trust the court, why wouldn't you, and you go ahead and do it. So who's on the hook?
And boom, right out of the gate, you've got two completely different takes. You've got Rabbi Meir, who says, hey, the individual is exempt. They were just following orders, basically. It's the court's fault. But then the other sages push back and say, nope, the individual is liable. At the end of the day, you are responsible for your own actions.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The sages' approach is, well, it's all about scale. For them, the key question isn't just about the ruling. It's about how many people followed it. Did a majority of the community make this mistake based on the ruling, or just a small minority? And that one little detail, it changes everything.
And just when you think you've got it, they add another layer of complexity. It's not just about how many people did it, but about the kind of mistake the court made. Was it a tiny detail they got wrong, or was it something huge? Something that basically tried to tear down the entire legal system?
This distinction is just brilliant. Look at this. If the court says something completely outrageous, like, you know what, there's no such thing as the Sabbath anymore, that's so far off the rails that the ruling is basically meaningless. The court isn't liable in that specific communal way. But if they mess up on a detail, like saying, oh, this specific action is okay on the Sabbath, then the court is on the hook. Why? Because in that case, they were actually trying to do their job, interpreting the law, they just got it wrong.
And they base this on a specific phrase from the Bible, and a matter is concealed. They interpret matter, or davar in Hebrew, to mean a specific detail. The court is only responsible when a particular thing was hidden from them, when they missed a piece of the puzzle. It's not about them trying to throw the whole puzzle away.
And then, man, they just start running with it, posing all these wild hypotheticals. Like, okay, what if you have two different mistaken rulings, and a small group of people follows each one? Can you combine those two groups to make a majority? Does it matter if the mistakes were similar? Like two rulings about different kinds of forbidden fat? Or what if they're totally unrelated, like one about fat and one about idolatry? They really test the limits of the logic here.
So after this intense intellectual workout, what's the big answer to all these detailed questions? Well, it's teku. That's an Aramaic word that basically means, we don't know. The question stands. It's left undecided, which is so amazing. It tells you that sometimes the most important thing is asking the right questions, not necessarily having all the answers.
Okay, let's keep going, because it doesn't stop there. They throw in another wrench, a really practical one. What happens when the court figures out it messed up and tries to take it back?
I mean, this is such a good question, right? The court issues a press release saying, our bad, we were wrong. But what about the person who didn't see it? They're still acting based on the old wrong information. Are they still covered? Suddenly, it's not just about the law, it's about communication and the flow of information. And you guessed it, we get another debate. Rabbi Shimon is firm. He says the person is exempt, period. They acted in good faith with the info they had. But Rabbi Elazar is a bit more hesitant. He says, it's a doubtful case. In other words, it's complicated.
Then this other scholar, Ben Azai, comes along and just cuts through the whole thing with this brilliant practical distinction. He basically asks one question. Was it even possible for the person to hear the news? If you were at home, near the center of things, then yeah, you probably could have heard. You're liable. But if you were traveling way out in the middle of nowhere, no way you could have known. You're exempt. It's this beautiful idea that the law has to be reasonable.
All right, so for our last section, the text kind of zooms out from all these specific scenarios and focuses on the judges themselves, on the incredible burden that they carry.
At one point, there was this idea that maybe the court should only be held responsible if their bad ruling was unanimous, but they shot that down. And it makes sense, right? If you required 100% agreement for every decision, nothing would ever get done. The system would just grind to a halt. So majority rule has to be the way to go.
But here's the kicker. Just because it's majority rule
doesn't let the dissenting judges off the hook. Rabbi Yehoshua gives us this powerful image. He says when 10 judges sit in judgment, it's like a single chain is looped around all 10 of their necks. They are all in it together.
And that responsibility is absolute. It doesn't matter if you're the senior judge or a young student just sitting in with your teacher. When you're part of that judicial body, the weight of responsibility is shared equally. You can't just say, oh, I was just the intern.
Which brings us all the way back to the beginning. The text is so clear about this, you can't use "I was just following orders" as an excuse if you actually knew better. If you're a judge and you know the ruling is wrong but you stay quiet, if you're a student who gets it, or if you're just a regular person who follows a ruling you know is mistaken, you are always 100% liable.
So, why does all this matter? What's the point? This is so much more than just some ancient legal debate. It's basically a blueprint for how a society can deal with the fact that its institutions are, well, human. They're fallible. And it's a deep dive into how you can create a system of accountability that works on every single level, from the highest court down to you and me.
And that really leaves us with a question for our own time, doesn't it? How do we find that balance between having faith in our institutions and our personal responsibility to question them when something just doesn't feel right? It's that eternal tug of war between trust and conscience. Thanks for digging into this with me.